Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm really glad you're here, and thank you for joining me today. Before we begin, I just want to mention one thing. I'm actually not feeling my best today, and I'm running a fever, so if I sound a little more low energy than usual, that's the reason. But I still really wanted to show up because I know many of you made time for this session, and I really believe this topic is an important one. Before I continue, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me well, if my microphone is working. Hopefully, yes. So today I will keep things a little more focused and direct, but my goal is still the same, to give you practical, useful information that helps you better understand your dog's shoulder strength and front-end function. There will also be time for the Q&A at the end, so if something comes up during the webinar, you can drop it into the chat, and I will really do my best to answer as many questions as I can. So I'm just going to bring the presentation up on the screen. Now, before we really get into the topic, let me quickly introduce myself for those of you who may not know me yet. My name is Jana Gams. I'm a doctor of veterinary medicine, a certified canine rehabilitation practitioner, and the founder of Dogs for Motion. I work with active dogs and canine athletes every day, from rehabilitation after injury all the way to performance support and conditioning for sport and for active life. And one thing I have seen again and again is this. Many dogs look strong, look fit, and capable on the outside, but when you look a little bit closer, the body is often not as prepared for the demands as we think. And the front end, especially the shoulders, is one of the areas where I see this a lot. And honestly, I really value being able to share information like this, information that I care deeply about and that I know can make a real difference for dogs and the people who live and train with them. So if today I can help you look at your dog's front end a bit differently and give you a clearer path forward, then this webinar has done its job. A lot of what I will talk about today are the same principles I keep coming back to in practice with my own cases and clients because they really make a difference. So today, what I want to do is help you understand why strong shoulders do not just happen by accident, why activity alone is often not enough, and what we can actually do to build better support for the dogs we ask so much from. All right, let's get into it. Let me start with a question. So what if I told you that one of the most important pieces of your dog's performance, movement quality, and long-term soundness does not come from doing more of the sport itself? And what if I told you that many active dogs, like even very fit-looking ones, are building impressive skills on top of a front that is not actually strong and organized enough for the load it needs to handle? Because when people think about dog fitness, they usually think high intent power first. And yes, of course, that matters. But if your dog breaks, also jumps and turns and lands, hikes, jumps off the sofa, going downstairs, even play hard, or simply loves to move fast through life, their shoulders are doing a huge amount of work. And here's the part most people miss. Shoulder problems often do not begin with one big dramatic injury. You see, much more often, they begin with small overload and small compensations that build quietly over time. So the dog starts sleeping a little more when tired, and very often they also start making mistakes in tasks that they have already mastered before. So that is something I really want you to pay attention to, because these little changes can be very easy to dismiss at first, especially if the dog is still motivated and still performing. In agility dogs, this might show up as more missed weave entries or a dog changing from a single step pattern to a double step pattern to spare the shoulders a bit. You might see wider turns because deceleration becomes more difficult. You may notice change striding over the contact obstacles, or simply an overall drop in speed. And these little mistakes are not only relevant in agility. They can creep into any sport or activity you do with your dog. So maybe your dog does not go downhill quite as smoothly on hikes anymore. Maybe they start missing more frisbee catches. Maybe in obedience you notice less powerful deceleration, or things just looking a bit less clean and effortless than before. And that is why observing these changes really matters, because often the body is telling us something before pain makes it obvious. I see dogs like this so often in practice. Dogs that look talented, driven, and capable. Dogs that are still willing to work. But when you watch carefully, you can see that the front end is not coping as well as it should. So the dog is still getting the task done, but not with ideal control. Maybe some of you have seen that too. A dog that looks fine overall, but something feels slightly off, not dramatic, not enough to say there is definitely an injury, but enough that you start thinking, something here is not as easy or clean as it should be. And the reason this matters is because the shoulder is not a joint that gets a lot of help from bony stability. It depends very heavily on muscles and soft tissues for support and control. So when those structures are not prepared well enough, the body still finds a way to complete the task, but it starts borrowing stability from somewhere else. So let's go a bit deeper into why this matters. One of the biggest misunderstandings that I see is this idea that doing the sport automatically builds the body for the sport. And I understand why people think that, because, for example, agility looks athletic, flyball looks athletic, disc dog looks athletic. Even a very active companion dog who hikes and runs and plays regularly looks athletic. So it feels logical to think that all of that activity must already be building enough strength and stability. But the truth is, sport training and physical preparation are not the same thing. Sport training improves skill, so it improves timing, it improves understanding of the task, it improves performance, but it does not automatically build the specific strength and control the body needs to stay organized under load. And that is especially important when we talk about the front end. Because the front limbs are already carrying a large percentage of the dog's body weight. And then on top of that, we ask them to absorb landing forces, to manage deceleration, stabilize during turning, and also reorganize quickly for the next movement. So that is a lot of work. And it is repeated over and over again. So yes, the dog may be active. Yes, they may be skilled. Yes, they may be doing a lot. But that still does not tell us whether the shoulder muscles and stabilizers are actually strong enough for the job. And that is where I think many people get caught a bit off guard, because the dog can still perform really well for quite a long time while the body is compensating underneath. And that is why I often say this. Sport training and activity test the body. It does not automatically build the body. So that, for me, is one of the most important mindset shifts in this whole conversation. Because once you understand that, you stop assuming that more repetitions of the sport will fix the problem. And you start asking a better question. So what does this dog's body actually need in order to handle this well? And for the shoulder, the answer is usually not more random activity. So just keep your own dog in mind here for a second. Maybe they're doing really well. Maybe they're not showing anything obvious. But ask yourself, does activity alone really guarantee that the front end is prepared for everything I'm asking from it? Because very often it does not. Now, this brings me to one of the main ideas I want you to take from today. So lameness-free is not the same as resilient, because resilience is not just about whether the dog can do the task. It's about whether the body can keep absorbing load, controlling movement, and tolerating those demands over time. So when the muscles around the shoulder and the front end are not doing enough of the stabilizing and force absorbing work, the body still finds a way through the task. But then more of that load starts shifting into passive structures, so tendons, ligaments, joint capsule, and other tissues that were never really meant to be doing that job over and over again. And this is where overuse starts building. So that is why I do not like the idea of waiting until there is pain before we pay attention. Because by the time pain appears, the body has often been compensating for quite a while already. And just to be very clear, I'm not saying every imperfect turn or every missed task means that there is a shoulder problem. Not at all. But what I'm saying is that repeated small changes in movement quality, behavior, or performance are worth paying attention to. Because often they are the first sign that the body is not managing the load as well as it should. And that, for me, is exactly why shoulder conditioning matters. Because it's really not just about stronger muscles. It is about creating a front end that can tolerate the demands we placed on it with better control, with better organization, and better long-term support. So at this point, the next question is usually, okay, but what are people missing? Because most people are not doing nothing. So they're trying, they care, they want to support their dog. But very often, what they do is still not building the kind of shoulder capacity the dog actually needs. Usually, it's one of a few things. So they do more of the sport and hope the body adapts. They add some random front-end exercises they found online, but without a clear plan or progression. They focus on stretching, massage, or short rest when something starts to feel a bit off. Or they go back to full work too quickly because the dog looks fine again. And the issue is not that these things are always wrong. The issue is that they often do not change the underlying capacity of the shoulder muscles and stabilizers. So they may help the dog feel better for the moment. They may improve something temporarily, but they do not necessarily build a front end that is better prepared for repeated load. And that is the missing link. Not more activity, not more random drills, not only treating the tightness after it appears. What is missing is targeted strengthening, clear progressions, and a better understanding of what good shoulder work should actually look like. Because if we don't change the capacity of the system, the dog will keep solving the task with the same movement patterns it already has. And that is why some dogs stay stuck in the same cycle. So the goal is not just to do more, it is to train more intentionally. So that is what I want to show you next. So if random activity is not enough and doing more of the sport is not the answer either, then what does better shoulder work actually look like? So for me, it comes down to 3 simple principles. The first one is start with control, not difficulty. So a lot of people think progress means making the exercise harder as quickly as possible. More repetitions, more instability, more challenge, more fancy setups. But that is not how I look at it. First, I want to see whether the dog can actually organize the body well in a simple setup. Can they hold posture? Can they accept load through the front end well? Can they stay stable without fidgeting or shifting away from the work? Because if that part is missing, making the exercise harder usually does not build better strength. It just builds bigger compensations. The second principle is train the shoulder as a stabilizer, not just as a moving limb. And this is really an important shift. So we're not just trying to exercise the front legs. We are trying to build a shoulder that can stay centered, supported, and controlled while the dog is turning, landing, decelerating, like loading the front end in general. So that means the goal is not just movement. The goal is really like this controlled weight bearing, good alignment, and muscles doing their share of the support work. And the third principle is progress gradually and with purpose. Strength is built over time. So instead of jumping from one random exercise to another, I want the dog to first understand the movement, then get stronger in it, and only then move into something more demanding. So that progression might come from changing the setup, increasing the load slightly, asking for better control, or even combining movements in a more challenging way. But the point is, there should be a reason for the progression. So not just, this looks harder, so it must be better. So really, the whole approach is quite simple. Teach the movement, clean it up, build strength in it, then progress. And that is how you create better shoulder support without just making the dog busy. And once you start looking at shoulder work through these three principles, it becomes much easier to tell the difference between useful conditioning and just doing the exercises. So before I show you what this looks like in practice, let's just take a very simple look at why the shoulder deserves this much attention. So the canine shoulder is built for mobility. And that is a good thing because it allows the front limb to move freely during running and turning and jumping and all the things active dogs do every day. But that mobility also comes with a price. So compared to a joint like the hip, the shoulder does not get that much support from bony structure. It depends much more on muscles and soft tissues to keep the joint stable and well controlled. So that means the shoulder is relying heavily on the surrounding muscular system to do its job well. So not just the muscles directly around the shoulder joint, but also the thoracic sling and the rest of the front end support system. And this matters because the shoulder is not only there to move the leg forward. So think about it, it really has to help absorb force on landing, control load during deceleration, stay organized in turns, and support the body during weight bearing. So it is doing much more than people often realize. And that is exactly why shoulder conditioning should not just be about movement for the sake of movement. It should be about building a front end that can stay stable, organized, and supported while all of these forces are going through it. So once you understand that, it becomes much easier to see why random activity is often not enough. Because what the shoulder needs is not just use, it needs support. So let's make this practical. I want to show you one exercise progression that I really like for shoulder work because it reflects the exact principles that we have been talking about. Control first, then loading, then more challenge with purpose. And the exercise I chose for today is front foot sidestepping. At the first level, we start with the basic version. So the goal is that the dog can step laterally with the front limbs in a controlled way while staying organized to the shoulders, trunk, and the rest of the body. So what I'm looking for here is clean movement, and this first level already tells you a lot. Can the dog shift weight well? Can they control the body while one forelimb moves and the other has to stabilize? Can they stay organized with the forearms vertically under the chest and keep their hind feet stable during a simple lateral task? So that is the kind of information I care about first. As one front limb moves, the other has to accept load and stabilize. So the shoulder muscles, thoracic sling, and trunk, they all need to work together to keep the body organized through the movement. So to begin, place two stable platforms of equal height parallel to one another with a small gap in between. Make sure that they are secure and not sliding or tipping when the dog shifts weight. Then invite your dog to stand with both front feet on one platform. From a balanced stance, then guide your dog to step sideways onto the second platform. Then allow them to stabilize before asking for another repetition. If your dog struggles to keep the hind feet still, you can place a third object under the hind feet, so that can be the same height, slightly lower, or even just a target mat. So this will help clarify that the hind end stays anchored while the front end moves. A few important troubleshooting points here. If the reward is too high, the dog may shift weight backwards onto the hind limbs, and then you lose some of this shoulder loading that we actually want. If the reward is too low, the dog may drop into a bow-like posture and again lose the right loading pattern. So the reward should stay aligned with the chest at a natural head height for the setup you're using. Another common issue is that the platforms are spaced too widely. So then the dog may overreach or take multiple steps instead of giving you one clean lateral step. So if that happens, reduce the gap. And if the hind feet keep moving, even when you use a rear object, sometimes like using a narrow object behind can actually help because it gives the dog a clear target and reinforces hind end stability. Once that basic version looks good across, the next step I like is rear feet elevated. So now in this step 2, we are increasing the demand on the front end. Because by elevating the rear feet, the center of gravity shifts forward, and that means the shoulders and front end stabilizers have to do more work. So the movement is still the same idea, controlled sidestepping through the front. But now the dog has to manage that movement under more load. So again, I'm not just looking at whether they can do it. I'm looking at how they do it. Can they stay stable? Can they still move cleanly? Can they keep good organization through the body? And here, reward placement matters again. So the focus should stay slightly forward and towards the ground, so the dog can maintain proper front end loading. And what I'm looking for is clean, deliberate lateral steps, forearms vertical under the chest between repetitions, rear feet stable on the elevated surface, and a straight back with steady posture. And then the third step is using objects of 2 different heights in front. And now the challenge changes again, because the forelimbs are moving not only sideways, but also vertically. So the shoulder now has to control the sideways shift, the lift up, and also the controlled descent down. So this setup increases the involvement of the shoulder stabilizers and also improves strength through a larger working range. And this is exactly the kind of progression I like. Not random difficulty, but a progression that changes the demands in a very specific way. So the dog now needs more control, more stability, and better body awareness to perform the exercise well. To set this up, place 2 front platforms of different heights parallel to one another. So you can also use one raised platform and a target mat on the ground if you want a simpler height difference. And here, reward placement becomes even more important. When stepping up, raise the reward slightly so the dog can reach a tall, aligned stand. And then, when stepping down, lower the reward to match the lower surface and maintain better weight distribution. So the reward should always support a neutral head position relative to the surface the dog is standing on. And after several repetitions, reverse the orientation of the platforms so that both front limbs perform the step up and step down phase equally. The biggest mistake here is not adjusting reward height to the platform height. So if the reward stays too high when stepping down, the dog may shift weight backward and reduce proper shoulder loading. If the reward stays too low when stepping up, the dog may crouch on the higher platform and lose alignment. So again, reward placement is not just a detail, it is really shaping how the dog performs the exercise. So this one progression already shows a lot of what smart shoulder conditioning should look like. We start with controlled lateral movement, then we increased front end loading, and then we increase the challenge by adding different heights and a larger working range. And across all of these levels, the priority stays the same. Clean posture, good weight transfer, and controlled repetition. Okay, but how do I know when to progress? A helpful rule here is what I often call the 80% rule. So if your dog can perform the current variation with good quality and control in roughly 8 out of 10 repetitions, then you can start thinking about progressing. If the movement is still inconsistent, messy, or clearly difficult to organize, then that usually means stay where you are a little longer. Because harder is not automatically better. Better is better. So hopefully this gives you a clear picture of how I want people to approach shoulder work. Not as random exercises, not as a quick fix, and not as something you only think about when the dog is already struggling. Because once you start looking at the front end this way, structure really matters. And what I mean by structure is not something complicated. I mean knowing where to start, what to look for, when to stay at the current level, and when the dog is ready for more. So that is exactly what helps people stop guessing. Because very often I see the problem is not lack of motivation. The problem is that people do not have a clear pathway. They're not sure which exercise makes sense first. They're not sure whether the dog is doing it well enough. And they're not sure how to progress without either doing too much too soon or staying too easy for too long. And that is where a structured course can really help. Because instead of just collecting exercises, you get a system, a way to build the movement first, then the strength, then the progression, with much more clarity and much less trial and error. And especially with shoulder work, that matters. Because if the setup, the posture, reward placement, and progression are not clear, it is very easy to end up doing something that looks, busy, but is not actually giving you the outcome you want. So this is really the bridge between knowing that shoulder conditioning matters and actually being able to do it in a useful way. So if what we covered today already gave you a different way of looking at your dog's front end, then this is exactly why I created Shoulder Strength. So Shoulder Strength is a step-by-step course designed to help you build a stronger, more stable, more resilient front end in a way that is clear, practical, and realistic to follow at home. It is built around the same principles I use in practice. So by teaching the movement well, building strength with intention, and progressing in a way that actually makes sense for the dog in front of you. And inside the course, we start with the foundations. So first, I help you understand the shoulder itself, how it works, why it depends so much on muscular support, and why the front end deserves more attention than it often gets. And then we go into the training principles that make shoulder work effective. How to set up your sessions, how to use reward placement well, how to recognize fatigue or discomfort, how to approach progression, and how to build better movement quality from the start. And from there, the course moves into the practical exercise chapters where I guide you through shoulder-focused exercises and progressions step by step. So you're not just shown an exercise, you also learn what to look for, what good repetitions should look like, common mistakes, and how to adjust if something is not working. There is also shoulder mobility work, more integrated movement sequences, and a chapter focused on prevention, detection, and recovery. So the course gives you both the practical exercises and the understanding behind them. So what I really wanted to create here was clarity, because I know that many people care deeply and want to do the right thing. They just do not always have a clear path. So the course is there to help you stop guessing, to help you understand what to train, how to train it, what to watch for, and how to progress without overcomplicating things. And that is really the whole point, to make shoulder conditioning practical, structured, and useful. So this course is for active dog owners and sport dog teams who want to support the front end more intentionally. So whether you do agility or flyball, disc, obedience, working dog sports, or you simply have a very active dog and want their body to hold up better over time, this course is made for that. It is also a good fit for dogs who are ready to restart strengthening after previous issues, as long as they're already cleared for exercise. But it is not meant as acute rehab for a painful dog. So remember, this is conditioning, and it works best when we use it proactively or as a part of a smart return to exercise. You don't need any fancy equipment. Most exercises use 2 platforms, and if you have a set of cavaletti rails, even better. It is designed with busy handlers in mind, and you can start seeing results with just 2 to 3 short 5-minute sessions per week. So when you join Shoulder Strength, you get lifetime access, so you can go through it at your own pace and revisit the material whenever you need it. And to make it easy to get started, it also comes with a satisfaction guarantee, so you can begin with peace of mind. And if you want even more support, there's also an optional progress workbook available to help you track sessions, notes, and your dog's improvements over time. So don't forget to add it on if you would find it helpful, because it really brings everything together and keeps you organized as you go. All right, so we've covered a lot today. So if you know that this is something your dog would benefit from and you want a clearer path for building shoulder strength and front end stability, then Shoulder Strength is there to guide you through that process. So really, you have a choice. You can keep doing what you have always done and hope your dog's shoulders hold up on their own. You can wait until small changes become bigger ones and only then start paying closer attention. Or you can start building better support now in a more intentional and structured way. And that, for me, is what Shoulder Strength is really about. Not waiting for a problem to force your hand, but helping your dog build the kind of front-end strength and stability that supports better movement, better durability, and better long-term soundness. So if this webinar gave you a different way of looking at your dog's front end, and you know you want a clear path forward, you can join Shoulder Strength through this link. It is going to be posted in the comments as well. So inside the course, I will guide you step by step through the same principles we talked about today, but in a much more complete and practical way. So I would really love to have you inside, and I truly hope it helps you and your dog as much as this approach has helped so many of mine. And with that, let's move into a Q&A. Okay, we have a question. Wondering what else could be wrong when limping front right but shows nothing on X-ray? What other task could help figure out what could be wrong? So the most important thing to understand in any soft tissue injuries is that they will simply not show on X-rays until there is a chronic problem and you start seeing either mineralization or bony changes. So the problem is we don't detect it with X-rays alone. X-rays are fantastic to rule out fractures, to see into the joint, to determine the joint problems as such. But for soft tissue injuries, we need to rely on other imaging techniques. So for instance, if we think about the shoulder joint as such, first, every checkup should begin with a very skillful palpation. So we can run a series of provoke tests to determine which area is painful, whether it's a muscle, is it a muscle tendon, is it a ligament? We can assess joint stability, and then based on our physical examination on palpation, we can then decide to proceed on with the proper imaging that supports better diagnostics. So for example, in shoulder joint, think about diagnostic musculoskeletal ultrasound. It is the best choice to evaluate the structures like bicep tendon, supraspinatus, infraspinatus. And then, if needed, and if we need to look further into the joint, we can also think about arthroscopy or MRI or CT. So that would be some of the imaging options if X-rays appear to be clear. Okay, Patricia asked, how can help a husky that has turned out front feet avoid shoulder injuries while running in harness? Okay, let me just read this again to understand the question. Okay, so you're probably asking about easty-westy pulse, I hope. So that's what I will be answering about. So we have to know that the entire forelimb is not attached to a trunk by a joint, but by muscles. And if we are looking at a easty-westy forelimbs, what happens is that it's usually not a wrist problem, but if you look at my hand, I hope you can see my picture. So if I want to turn my feet out, I will do it from a shoulder. So definitely, shoulder strengthening can support the structures that are responsible for keeping the limb in better posture, in better place. So definitely, for anyone who has weaker patterns or easty-westy feet, like feet turned out, shoulder strengthening is extremely important, because among all the exercises presented, we also touch upon medial shoulder and musculature that are responsible for bringing the limb closer to the body. So yeah, definitely shoulder strength course is a fit also for these dogs. Okay, next question. Are these exercises appropriate for a 22-month-old, very active dog with a dysplastic elbow? It has a small chip and surgery was not advised. So if the dog was cleared to be active and to remain in the activities, then absolutely yes. I have to say that if at one point the dog would start feeling pain from the elbow issue, let's say, modifications are definitely needed. But since you mentioned that this is a very active dog and the surgery was not advised, definitely strengthening the entire forelimb chain is advisable, and the course also presents you with a very gradual progression, so you can start with the most easy variations of the exercise and then progress as the dog is able to and improves. But when we also have to know that whenever we are dealing with any underlying pathologies, we have to first have the diagnosis, the dog has to be cleared for the exercising, and we have to pay close attention for possible compensations for any signs that the dog is perhaps feeling a discomfort. So really looking at how they perform the exercise, are they showing any avoidance, and just observe and listen to your dog, perhaps even more carefully than you normally would. Okay, one more question. What muscles would you target in a dog used for canicross bike curing? Is shoulder workout something you would focus on, or more back-end exercises? So the front end has a massive role in all canicross, bike curing, all pulling sports. Not necessarily they need stronger shoulders. So for sure, all dogs, they need whole body conditioning if they're active. But what is even more important in, let's say, dogs that are pulling, and I mentioned they are working a lot with their shoulders, is that if we rely too much on strengthening alone, we can lose mobility. And shoulder strength course also touches upon that. So it's not just for building stability and strength, but also providing the dog with sufficient mobility, active mobility through the shoulder region, which directly improves well-being and just making sure that the forelimb is in a nice, relaxed form And yeah, definitely. If I just sum it up, my answer, yes, also these dogs would benefit a lot from the shoulder strengthening, and even more than the strength alone would be appropriate the mobility part that is also delivered with that course. So yes, welcome. Okay, next question. Anna is asking, is this course only for young dogs? I have a senior dog with elbow arthritis and it is very easy to overtrain his front feet. Already went through both fundamental conditioning courses. Okay, so if you already tried some of my exercises and even workouts, you know that I pay a lot of attention to the foundational behaviors, and all the exercises can be brought down to the simplest version there is. So I would definitely say also a yes to this case, also to dogs with some underlying physical weaknesses. But as I explained earlier in my reply to one of the other questions, we just really need to observe the dogs, and especially if you're dealing with some sort of a weakness, you also have to make sure that you're not going to overload that area. So in these cases, it's even more important to structure it into a well-rounded conditioning plan a little bit more thoughtfully. So having a fundamentals course gives you the great foundation and a great base that you can layer on top exercise variations and plenty of new moves that you can definitely teach your dog. So definitely not just for young dogs, but also for dogs of all active stages. However, if the dog is experiencing a lot of weakness, then I would definitely say that perhaps our fundamentals for senior course might be a better fit, simply because it touches upon different pathologies and how to adjust the exercises, and it provides you with a full body approach. But hearing that you already have access to one of the full body conditioning courses, I'm sure that you would find new fun and also benefit with the shoulder strength material. Janice is asking, how would I best build up my 12-month-old pup's shoulder muscle after she had surgery 4 months ago in her elbow after having a growth plate issue in her wrist, causing her bone to stop growing? So she's getting PT, but her shoulder muscles on the left side is smaller and weaker. Okay, so whenever we are dealing with a more serious issue, I would always recommend working through a tailored approach. So hearing that you're already working with your PT, this is awesome. So I believe that shoulder strength course can provide you new ideas and give you a lot of new material, and also perhaps the deeper understanding of the forelimb function and the shoulder. And because shoulder is not working in an isolated way, we always are thinking about the entire front limb. So definitely it can bring value, but I would definitely also recommend that you check in with your PT, or that you reach out. Yeah, you can definitely reach out to me via the email, and I can definitely help you to tailor the exercises to suggest appropriate variations to make it beneficial and safe for your dog's case. Okay, Fran is asking, my dog is doing agility, 4-year-old German Shepherd dog. Can I continue this sport, then start the shoulder program? Or do I need to stop agility first? No, absolutely. It's not needed that you stop any activity unless the dog has like some problems. But conditioning courses are meant to be done alongside all the rest of the activities you're already enjoying with your dog. So being like daily activities, or maybe any sports training that you're doing, because I really designed these courses with busy owners, busy handlers in mind. I personally also train agility and obedience with my dogs, and I know the importance of having just short, quick sessions along the week to not, on one side, to not overload the area and also not to overload my schedule. So definitely it's doable to continue with everything, and then you just sneak in 2 or 3 short sessions per week and just give these shoulders a little bit more support. Okay, Rosalie is asking, hi Anna, hi Rosalie. If I buy this training course, will I be able to ask you questions privately during the course? I train mondioring and we have 3 types of jumps: a hurdle, a long jump, and a palisade. These are 3 jumps that can obviously put strain on my dog's body if done incorrectly. At the moment, I'm focusing on balance training, but I would like to know if I can ask you questions privately through the program. So the course itself is a self-study, meaning that you get to access the material at your own pace and you get to follow the structure on your own. However, I'm always available to any tailored programs, to any questions you may have about your dog, about your dog's performance, about your dog's specific issues, specific questions, like, for example, for your dog and mondioring jumps. I'm definitely happy to take you on through one of my remote consult options. And yes, if you would like to proceed in this direction, you're definitely welcome to reach out to me via the email, and we can definitely see how I can help you best with the specific questions that you have. Jody is asking, how do you fit this new course in with your fundamentals, mastering mobility courses? Excellent question. Fundamentals Canine Conditioning course gives you a great foundation. You have the weekly workouts that you can simply take and follow it through, and then all the shoulder strength exercises you simply weave into the existing workouts. So either you add it as an additional exercise to the workout, or you progress through the variations and all these progressive stages of an exercise. So it makes a wonderful combination. If any of you have access to either fundamentals series or agility, dynamics, and control, those come with a pre-planned workouts. So this makes it very easy for you to simply take the shoulder strength exercises and put them into the existing routines. And yes, Mastering Mobility is a little bit different course. It's designed for providing the dog with an overall active mobility sessions, and those are primarily meant to be relaxing and unwinding your dog's body, and are done separately from the strengthening workouts alone. So I believe you will be able to find a way to put all these contents together, because they are designed to fit together. Another question, my dog had bicep tendinopathy, one leg, diagnosed on CT scan, been 5 months, back to normal walk, but not back to agility yet. Can I start her training again, or should I start the shoulder training first? If the dog is 5 months back to normal walks and you have definitely came through all these early phases of rehab, and the dog is now clear to start thinking about agility and more activities, then definitely before you take on the sports training sessions, it is really important that you build appropriate stability, strength, and mobility in the region. So for the bicep tendinopathy in particular, we have to definitely put our attention to re-strengthening this tissue before we present it with bigger loads that come with stopping and landing after jumps. And definitely shoulder strength would be the best possible fit, starting from beginner exercises and then progressing through intermediate and advanced variation as your dog also improves. So if you're unsure about how to progress through and when is it appropriate, again, you're welcome to reach over. Just send me an email and I will do my best to respond and help you out with your dog's particular case. Okay, I believe we have a couple of minutes left to answer some more. So Terry is asking, where can I purchase the small platforms in your video? I absolutely love my Flora platforms. So this is a small business, small brand in Europe, but they ship worldwide, and they have really cool wooden platforms that I love using. So they have different sizes, different heights. So yeah, Floro agility equipment. I think you can find them online on Instagram, Facebook, or search the web for it. And if you join our courses, I give you the direct link to access their web shop. And yes, they ship worldwide. Thanks for the question. I really love them. Ashley is asking, my 2-year-old miniature American Shepherd recently dislocated his humerus while playing fetch. It was put back in place and was in a sling for 2 weeks. Is there anything specific that you would recommend to help during the recovery phase? Okay, so that would be one case where I would definitely not jump straight into self-study conditioning, because if there was a dislocated joint that needed to be put back, this for sure resulted in ligament damage, in a certain degree of a ligament damage. So you have to know really sure the degree of the injury, how stable the joint is right now, because if it was for 2 weeks in a sling, just please check that this joint is stable. It might very well be that you will need quite some weeks more to gradually get the strength back. So yes, in the future, I would definitely see the shoulder strength useful, but right now, the dog that is so close after an injury needs a tailored approach. So work with your rehab physio, or if you don't have access to one, like I said, you can always reach out to me via the remote consultations, and I can help you online via teleconsultations. But to be the safest for your dog, I would recommend a tailored approach and a careful planning on the next steps. We have one more question. Is there a program which not only covers the shoulders, but also the carpus, flat feet, and overall instability of the front end? Well, lucky for you, the shoulder strength is exactly that. I already mentioned that the shoulder doesn't work in isolation. It's the entire forelimb chain. And we cannot exercise the shoulder without making sure that also the structures distal, so down the limb, the wrists, the feet, the elbows are not working properly and are not getting strengthened. So don't be fooled by the name of shoulder strength. Yes, everything starts in the shoulder, and this is the joint that has the most muscular support, but you can be sure that we are addressing the entire forelimb chain. Okay, Carla is asking, I have the SOAS course. Should one do these exercises on the same day or alternate? Actually, you can do these exercises on the same day, because those two courses are working on different body parts, and you can easily combine them in a single session without overloading one part over the other. So definitely totally doable to combine them. Some exercises will also overlap because the core and the psoas is engaged in many stabilization exercises. So think about cookie shifts and all these exercises where the dog is required to hold their posture. So for sure, these are going to overlap, but all exercises that are specifically working on a particular area, psoas power focuses on the psoas and the hind end, and the shoulder strength focuses on the shoulders and the front end. So excellent idea of simply combining them in a single workout. And then it gives you nearly the full body approach. Okay, I think I will take on just a few more questions. So Annette is asking, OCD operation at 6 months, now 7 years. Shoulder program beneficial for elbow? Absolutely. Absolutely. You just have to know whether your dog is currently in a good feeling, so not in any acute pain or visible weakness. But yes, shoulder strength program, like I said, it helps to strengthen the structures down the entire forelimb. So also suitable for elbows and for wrist strengthening. Okay, so thank you for being here and for taking the time to invest in your dog's health and movement. And I really can't wait to see you inside Shoulder Strength, and I look forward to supporting you on this journey. So have a fantastic rest of your day and happy training, and I hope you enjoyed this session just as I did.